To my translator, maybe the lunge to the sideward, your lip ballet, equals the hardest case, squatty with concision, straightway askance. The reasons for this are numerable. All the appurtenances, I am accessible to say, mark their leave somewhere. This is the only one of mandates I come to you bearing. Hand me into this new space. Think with me the multiplication of tables, the last of shoes. How particulate the writhing trees, where my heart is windy. Are you hearing its air? One can transfer parts of ourself throughout these lines. Please to be the who to transverse. St. Luke paints the Virgin. As soon as his brush lifted, the elixir of her withdrew, leaving her mud in small-shaped phrases. He was painting his desire to hold her always and want her never. I'd trade always for an apple, said the assistant, stroking the arc of a cheek as his teeth marked minutes along his lips. Holiness is separation, pooling just beyond depiction in a single swimming thought. That Luke could ever get her down was either blasphemy or fantasy, and both options beckoned. Know me, he heard her say. Take my likeness, make me likely.
This one is from my recent chapbook, another one, which is called Incompetent Translations and Inept Haiku. And it's put out by Chervena Barva Press, which is a Boston press, Somerville. And Gloria Mindock is the editor of that press. So this is called Pinochle in My Snout. The paneled linoleum basement rec room with tables set up for pinochle, salami, and schnapps. My uncles, grandfather and father at one table, my aunts and mother at the other. The blurry TV on, the bookcases with glass fronts and carved locked doors holding auction volumes and foreign coins. My three sisters in ballerina tutus running up and down the stairs. My unemployed younger cousins on the back lawn smoking Luckies. My coiffed older cousins discussing the subdivisions of the Republican future. Albums of peeling Polaroids, dirty doilies, fuzzy rugs, the fetching wreckage of an arsoned heart. Does anyone want anything else to eat? Anyone? Anyone? I like the poet Arthur Rimbaud, French poet. There's a line of Rimbaud where he says, because of sensitivity, I have lost my life. I'm too sensitive. And the word in French for sensitivity is delicatesse. But I don't speak French, so here's my poem. 1. Rimbaud said, par délicatesse, j'ai perdu ma vie. In the delicatessen, I have lost my life. I know what he meant. I also have wandered among the smokefish, lean pastrami, marble rye, have stood by the wicked pickle barrel, have stared longingly at the crumbly halva. 2. Dante said, one day he found himself in a delicatessen, selva oscura, not knowing which aisle to walk down, not knowing which meat to choose. He too felt that he had lost his life. I know what he meant. I too have suffered paralysis in a plethora of possibility. Belly or nova, herring or tongue, chub or sable, krepla or kishki, Google or blueberry blimps. 3. Fitzgerald. In the real dark night of the soul, it is always 3 o'clock in the delicatessen. Oh, lost! Oh, lost! He lost his compass in the schmaltz. I know what he meant. I've been in the 3 a.m. cream cheese. I've known the hole in the bagel. The potato knish is doughy. My life? a schmear in somebody else's appetite.
I have a question about reading poetry and what your feeling is about the reader knowing the intent or the thoughts of the poet. Because I've gone to a number of poetry readings and other things, and the people that are creating them say, people always ask that, but it's what you bring to it and what you get out of it. But I find when I'm reading, and maybe it's because it shapes what I understand, and maybe other times I just don't understand, I find it more satisfying to have a little bit of guidance when I'm reading something.
Are you talking about reading it on the page versus hearing it read, or is that a difference for you?
Probably, but I wasn't thinking about that. Either way, just...
Have you ever read The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Coleridge? So it's this poem, and on the side there are kind of, by Coleridge, kind of explanations, synopses of like what's happening. So if you can't follow it here, you can follow it here. You try it and see if you like that kind of thing. I think you'd be better off just, with the poem.
Marsha, what you said about what fear does,
Yeah.
for me, and maybe it's my own lack, for me it shapes my understanding of what the poem says, as opposed to saying what the reference is for each thing. So I was just wondering what the two of you feel about that when people are reading or hearing your poetry.
A lot of poets are liars.
My dad included.
You have a lot of poets who have explained their works in a certain way because they don't want you to see their works in a different way, which might be a more accurate way. So some of these explanations by writers and poets are subterfuge and fog and deceptions of one kind or another. And the best example is somebody like T.S. Eliot or Nabokov. Who wants to shape his works in a certain way, and so says, it's definitely not this, but whenever anybody says it's definitely not this, it's usually that.
I'd say let's go to the middle ground somewhere. Not only are poets liars, but the poems are lies also. They're in a different way. So the question is, I guess what I would like as when I'm reading in a situation like this, I would like what you hear to be maybe interesting enough so that you'd want to go back to it at some point. Because I think in my own experience in reading a poem, I never get it on the first round. And if I do, then, there's not that much going on there probably.
And it changes over time. So when you read a poem at 20, it's not the same poem that you read when you're 40 or 60 or 80. So
So how would you react to a reader or a listener who's deeply affected by an image or a metaphor or a line, deeply affected in terms of his or her own personal experience, but it doesn't accord with your original intent?
Well, there's a really great book called Validity and Interpretation by a different Hirsch. I know Eddie Hirsch, and this is another E.D. Hirsch. He makes the distinction between meaning and significance. And so it's a very important distinction. I think often in readings, when we listen to a poem, an image or a group of words or something affects us in a certain way, and that is the significance. It can be personal significance, social, whatever, but it's a connection that we have with that particular work. And it may or may not be in accord with what the poem itself might be saying, and that is in the realm of the meaning of the poem, which is a separate kind of entity from, how it makes you feel, or what it makes you think of, or what memory it triggers, or...
Well, is there a qualitative distinction between significance and meaning?
Qualitative, completely qualitative. And in this book, I can't recommend it too highly, Hirsch goes through ways in which you, what you need to do in order to understand the meaning of something versus these...
And the title?
Yeah, it's called Validity in Interpretation.
By, again,
E.D. Hirsch,
E.D. Hirsch.
the guy who did cultural literacy a few years after.
And I'm just very, we had a poet that came to visit us last year, Aaron Tove. I don't know if you know Aaron Tove, who writes simultaneously English, Yiddish, and Hebrew. All of his poetry appeared. So the Polish Symphony Orchestra decided to put his poetry to music. And so he was so excited when the CD came out, he sent me a copy. And I put it on, it sounds like garbage to me. That's a lot of noise. And so, but because he's a friend of mine, I gave him a really good review. So I gave him a really good review. And the moment I put the review, I get to say back, how could you say that? It was nothing but a bunch of noise. So if he knew it was noise, why not? I'm trying to be kind.
That's like writers will send stuff to publishers and put some of the pages upside down and leave some out just to see if they
Well,
notice.
you know what the two with that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck said when they said that
Right.
they deliberately wrote against Sinai to see if it would be accepted or not.
Right.
But you have to see they were really reading the scripts.
Or Jerzy Kosinski, who wrote Painted Bird, but he also wrote this novel Steps, which was a National Book Award. So, like, I forget how many years later, a decade or 15 years later, something like that, he resubmitted that work that won this award to all these publishers, and they all rejected it. It was really good.
So we haven't answered your question, right?
I'm writing down E.D. Hirsch, so I remember between now and
We'll check it out.
getting home.
There was something,
Poem leaves a lot of things out. I think that's a reality in poetry. There's a lot that you have to into. So I think that was helpful to for you to say fear was very distorting and then have the poem do that. Of course,
But I would say that, I think that's wonderful. But if you were to read Ping and see it totally differently and think it was about something totally different, I'd be perfectly comfortable with your understanding of the poem in the way that you know it affects you. So I don't feel that you'd have to necessarily align yourself with my reading of a certain poem. And poets aren't always the wisest readers of their poems. Sometimes, you know, as we write, there's a kind of unconscious, composer inside of us. And so our unconscious is working on these poems. And so there are things in our poems that are there, but we may not see them, but you may see them. So I often think that readers are sometimes better readers than writers.
it's definitely happened to me that somebody points out something in a poem of mine that I wasn't aware of.
It's extraordinary. It's a wonderful moment. It's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh my goodness, it's like, wow, that was awesome.
So it's a mysterious process of creating and a mysterious process of receiving or
I think
responding.
Robert Frost used to say that people read into his poems all kinds of stuff that he had no idea.
Well, that's true, and, you know, and that's the other thing. I mean, that's not to say that there aren't misreadings. There are misreadings, and you know, I think there's, you know, kind of a target area of you know, kind of where meaning is. But that doesn't mean your arrow always hits there. And so with Frost particularly, there's a lot of crazy, you know, stuff, and it's not just Frost, but there are a lot of crazy interpretations. And I'm not of the school that like anything you say is right, anything you say is fine. I mean, I'm not that kind of teacher either, so I like to say, you know, it's nice to say yes, right, and it's also okay to say no, that's wrong.
Stopping by woods. It's all about Santa Claus.
Exactly. I use that as a good example of you know, kind of misreading. Yeah, Giddy.
I think it also depends on everyone's experience when you read something. I was giving the example of the ducklings, crossing the ducklings from what's the name of the book, with someone discussing it, and he said, this is the best story of immigration. And he said, well, I have read this book a million times and never crossed my mind that this is a story of immigration. And I said, you know, I'm an immigrant, so it just appeals to me, it just talks to me exactly like that. So you may read the poem and you have different understanding based on your own experiences, and they wrote it for some other reason. And it's totally, perfectly fine, because art is how we interpret what is in front of us.
Once it's out there, and it's no longer yours to kind of control, you know, how it's received or understood or anything like that. It's, you know, we produce children, and then at some point, we can't, sometimes we want to, but we can't hold on to them, forever.
It becomes
We can't
public
control
domain.
everything.
And we
Ladies and
don't want to
gentlemen, it
win
is
the-
precisely 4 o'clock. We have filled these 2 hours quite stimulatingly, if there is such a word, and I want to thank our featured poet so much. All of you who read your poems, and all of you who showed up on this very challenging day, really, thank you so much.